Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. Today is a primer for the panic, healthism, orthorexia, and great conversations that have started after the publication of Time Magazine's article that featured my ultra-processed food experiment. Welcome to all of the new listeners on this podcast who have come by way of that article and otherwise. To make sure we're on the same page heading into next week, I'll give some context for ultra-processed foods and call back to some of the great guests we've had on here. Another reason this is a primer episode and not a robust review is that I was in the hospital last week. And as much as I'm sure that some people will blame my ultra-processed food consumption for the reason why, it was actually a planned stay that took a few years of planning and convincing on my part. I haven't talked about it much on the pod, but I've had epilepsy for 30 years. It's mostly, kinda managed by medication. And I did a video EEG last week to see if there's a way for me to be closer to seizure-free and fry my brain a little less as I age. The team reduced my medication so I would have multiple seizures for a few days. And because a lot of last week was a blur, today's episode will just set the stage for the main act. In a lot of article feedback, the belief of healthism was often intertwined with people's comments, if not their entire dissertation. And I will say that my internalized healthism and ableism are things that I've had to stare down in the face in order to be okay with who I am. In fact, making the decision to do a primer episode rather than the deep dive this week was something I needed to breathe through and know that I'm not valued based on my productivity. Later this fall, I have a few episodes about chronic illness, including what came of that video EEG, and a guest who was recently diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 40 who's going through treatment. If you all have folks you'd like me to interview about their conditions, feel free to email me at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com, and I'll see if they're interested. And if you would like to share your story, let me know. Now, to help us get oriented for next week, I have some feedback that I'm incredibly excited to share. Dr. Mark Hyman, whose product and branding seems to be the love child of Gwyneth Paltrow and Dr. Oz, had a 5-minute monologue about the Time article. I had heard of Mark here and there, but truly didn't know he was that guy in the health and wellness space until he felt compelled to chime in.
Hey, everybody. I just got to chime in here on this horrible article that was in Time Magazine.
My favorite section of his speech was when he was talking about ultra-processed food definitions.
And this confuses the reader and says, oh, it's not so bad. There's no real definition of ultra-processed food. It's nonsense. There's many definitions.
And he's absolutely right. There are many definitions. Dr. Julia Menichetti, a principal investigator at Harvard Medical School, was quoted in the article saying that if you give two researchers the same ingredient list, quote, they will have different opinions about whether something is processed. And I've been lucky to have two researchers on this program telling me definitively what an ultra-processed food is. Dr. Robert Lustig knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, I think there are two primary problems with processed food. Not one, but two. And they overlap each other significantly. One is the addition of excess sugar. That's true. And the reason for that is because that alters metabolism in a negative direction. And the second problem is the lack of fiber, because that promotes inflammation in a negative direction. And I think the two of them together add up to ultra-processed food. I mean, there are other things wrong with ultra-processed food, too. Don't get me wrong. There's emulsifiers, there's antibiotics, there's, various food additives and colorants. There's branched-chain amino acids. There's, a host of different things that have been done to the food. But I think each of those adds maybe a total of 5 to 10% of the problem, whereas I think sugar and fiber are the overwhelming majority of the problem.
Okay, so we're clear. Then we had Dr. David Wiss educating us.
Obviously, ultra-processed foods are generally produced for private profit rather than for public health, so they are engineered to be more rewarding.
And he certainly cleared it up for us.
I think an easier way to understand Category 4 NOVA ultra-processed foods is that you generally can't look at them and identify what the food group is, what the minimally processed food group is. So if you were to look at a pastry or a chip, it's not obvious that it was a wheat plant or a corn on the cob, per se.
To who?
Right? To the naked eye, as well as, to the body.
And then, as Mark said,
there's many definitions, including NOVA classification, which was developed in Brazil. And it's not that complicated.
It's not? Well, that's reassuring.
To make sure we're all on the same page, I'll read the definition for Group 4 ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are industrial formulations made entirely or mostly from substances extracted from foods, derived from food constituents, or synthesized in laboratories from food substrates or other organic sources. Manufacturing techniques include extrusion, molding, and pre-processing by frying. Beverages may be ultra-processed. Group 1 foods are a small proportion of or even absent from ultra-processed products. Examples of Category 4 ultra-processed foods include instant soups, sauces, pastries, but also infant formulas, bars, and breakfast cereals. Other examples include pre-prepared or packaged meat, fish, and vegetables.
To make sure I was clear on the NOVA classifications before doing my experiment, I asked another researcher, Amy Fletcher, to give us the easy explanation. So we are in a classroom. Okay, the scary ultra-processed foods. So this again is a foods situation. And to me, this reads as if these ingredients touch and there's like more than one of them, mostly is a term here. Many.
I think, yeah. So that's why I called the boxes squishy, because like mostly and many is stressful. I mean, I think the big thing here is that you're adding like stabilizers, emulsifiers, things like that. Like, I think that's the real difference. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I still question that, because like some emulsifiers, like egg yolk is a very commonly occurring emulsifier.
Right.
So like eggs are in group 1. So if you bought like a mayonnaise that was with emulsified with egg, which is how you would also make homemade mayo. Is that bad? Because it mentions emulsifiers, but like eggs and oil are group 1 and 2, which would make it 3. Mm-hmm. But is it 3? Or is it 4?
I guess it doesn't have mostly, and it's not many.
But then also like sausage, for example. So like meat is fine. But like to make like, again, homemade sausage, you just grind it with spices. Mm-hmm. So like grinding is allowed in this list of group 1. So like what about the sausages? Is it like, because like I can go to Sprouts and get like pre-made sausage from the butcher's counter. Are those still group 4? So like I think the premise, I'm assuming the premise is that we're buying all of these things in the store.
Right.
I guess, I mean, like, is homemade apple pie ultra processed? Or like French fries? Are French fries, like, I mean, French fries at their, like, In-N-Out French fries are really just cut up potatoes.
Correct. And not,
But like, is frying, like, why is frying, is it the oil that makes the French fries the problem? Because you could also, well, let me see my list again. Like, you could also oil the outer jacket of a baked potato, or the outer peel of a baked potato when you bake it. Mm-hmm. So why is a baked potato, is there something inherent in frying versus baking? Because they both could have oil and salt added.
I'm with you.
So I don't understand I don't understand the line.
Right. I have seen things, articles, etc., that talk about the generally like understood definition of an ultra processed food in some circles is that it needs at least five ingredients, etc.
I mean, I think like part of the issue that I have with this is that these are like trying to be rules, but they're not like clear rules. Like if it's going to be a rule, it needs to be a rule. So like looking at like energy bars on this list, like Lara bars are energy bars,
RX bars,
that are really just like dates and some other nuts and stuff. Mm-hmm. So would those go into ultra processed? Because I think like Lara bars only have like at least some of them only have like 5 or 6 ingredients.
Right. And then Fritos have 3 total.
Yeah.
But they're corn chips and ultra processed.
So, like, also, like, here it's pasteurized plain yogurt is okay, but, like, fruit yogurts. But what if, like, I make fruit yogurt most days?
I think you were right about the, like, it's the assumption that we buy it in the store. But where are we buying it?
And I mean, even in the store,
yeah,
they do, like, some stores do have where you can buy like a yogurt parfait, essentially.
Delicious.
Like a fruit yogurt.
Oh, let's talk about the $20 smoothies from Erewhon that have collagen added. What the fuck is collagen? Is that make it an ultra processed food? It also has resveratrol. Is that the stuff that you put on your skin? No.
That's skincare is not my...
No. What is that? Oh,
retinol?
No.
What about like a fancy chocolate shop? Does it matter if it's fancy versus non-fancy?
Ooh,
so like this is Ginger Elizabeth, which is a local Sacramento like chocolatier, different than Hershey's. Because often when you buy candy from like a fancy chocolate shop, at least, I mean, I don't buy a lot of chocolate, so maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen a like full ingredient breakdown. I've seen allergen call-outs, but I don't know, like, what are they using in their chocolate? I don't know. I mean, chocolate.
Right, but I'm paying 5 times as much for that chocolate.
Yeah, so like, if we're assuming that it's store-bought, like, what store are we buying it at?
Wow. Woo! I'm glad everything is cleared up for us. One of my favorite lines of the article is a quote from Julie Hesch, a research nutritionist at the USDA, who said, quote, "You end up with a system where gummy bears and canned kidney beans aren't treated so differently," end quote. And I'll end it there for today. I look forward to being back with you next week. I've only just gotten a physical copy of the magazine, and the title and subtitle are even better than I expected. Still processing. Not all ultra-processed foods are the same, or, some argue, even unhealthy. Much better than the online titles, of which there were 2. Until next time, friends, make it awkward. This has been Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson. If you'd like to leave an awkward review, please do so on your podcast platform. The show is edited, mixed, and centrifuged by podcast researcher Jen Jacobs. This is a production of The Body Politic. You can join the podcast Patreon, link in the bio, and it is supported by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.